können glücklich sein zu wissen, dass diese Zukunft restlos uns gehört.
Adolf Hitler had never disguised his belief that the Soviet Union would be his regime's ultimate enemy.
Der sich als Träger seines besten Blutes fühlen und dieses wissend zur Führung der Nation.
He hated communism and saw the vast open spaces and abundant natural resources of Soviet Russia as the prize which would finally enable the German people to become the master race. Throughout the early months of 1941, as he stayed at the Berghof, his country retreat in the Bavarian Alps, Hitler planned his greatest gamble. Operation Barbarossa, the assault on the Soviet Union. Steadily, his armies were redeployed to the east and re-equipped for what would be their greatest challenge. But Hitler had one other task to perform before he could push on to Russia. He needed to secure his southern flank. Romania, Bulgaria and Hungary were Germany's firm allies. But in March 1941, the Yugoslav government, sympathetic to Germany, was overthrown by pro-British forces. Its next-door neighbour Greece was also pro-British. So, on April the 6th, 1941, the German army invaded the Balkans. "33 German divisions moved into Yugoslavia. They swiftly tore its defences apart. The capital, Belgrade, surrendered on April 12th. Greece fell almost as quickly. Despite British help, Athens was captured in less than 3 weeks. The way was now clear for Operation Barbarossa. Over 4 million men were to be deployed. They were supported by more than 3,000 aircraft. The plan called for 3 simultaneous thrusts. Army Group North would overrun the Baltic states and seize Leningrad. Army Group Center was to advance to Moscow. And Army Group South would occupy the Ukraine. Hitler's generals went silent when he showed them the plan. They were worried it was too ambitious and would spread their forces too thinly. But none dared voice their doubts. The Red Army was much bigger. It had nearly 2 million men within striking distance of the Western Front and millions more in reserve. The Russians also had more than 20,000 tanks, far outnumbering Germany's 6,000. They were older and less powerful, but they were still a formidable fighting force. The issue for Germany was, could its superior technology and speed overwhelm the Russians before the Red Army's vast numbers ground them down? Operation Barbarossa began at 3:15 a.m. on June the 22nd, 1941. The Luftwaffe joined in at dawn, targeting Soviet airfields. Simultaneously, the ground attack began. On June the 29th, 7 days after the start of the assault, 2 panzer thrusts met up near Minsk, surrounding huge pockets of Soviet troops. As the follow-up infantry arrived, more than 300,000 prisoners were taken. Often the Germans found themselves welcomed as liberators, particularly in the Ukraine, where anti-Russian feeling was widespread. In Moscow, Stalin appeared to have suffered a near breakdown at the news of his betrayal by Hitler. He remained silent for more than a week. Not until July the 3rd did he appeal to his people's patriotism to save the motherland. In Britain, the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, received the news of Operation Barbarossa with very different feelings. It meant the country no longer stood alone. He announced that any enemy of Nazi Germany was a friend of Britain's, no matter what the political differences in the past. He then sent a mission to Moscow to sign a treaty of mutual assistance with Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov. But apart from sending aid by sea, there was little Britain could do immediately to help the Soviet Union. In early July 1941, over 300,000 Red Army troops were surrounded west of Minsk. Within a week, the panzers were at Smolensk, deep inside Russia and only a couple of hundred miles from Moscow. On July the 22nd, a panzer pincer movement met to the east of Smolensk, trapping another 310,000 Soviet troops. Here there was a brief pause, while the rest of the army caught up. Though the tanks could move at spectacular speed, most of the army still had to walk or rely on horse-drawn transport. But it still only took them 5 days before they arrived and began mopping up. The operation was completed in just 9 more days. Vast columns of Soviet prisoners began trudging west to captivity. Over 2.5 million never returned. Moscow was now only 200 miles away, and the road lay open. It seemed certain it would fall by the end of the summer, as planned. But elsewhere, the German advance was finding the going more difficult. The Red Army was counterattacking more effectively, and by mid-July, Army Group South was still more than 50 miles from Kiev. Hitler decided Guderian's panzers should delay their advance on Moscow and swing south to Kiev to provide help. Guderian objected strongly, but Hitler was adamant. There should be no further advance on Moscow until Kiev had fallen. It would turn